Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
All right, everybody, welcome to the PWZ podcast. About a year and a half ago, I spoke with this gentleman, actually was my very first guest on this podcast. So he's returning today because his book has now been released, a book that I've been really looking forward to over the last, probably a year and a half or so since I've read it on Herb Abrams. It's titled Tortured Ambition, I believe, right? Yep. And the book has finally been released, so we're getting an update from Jonathan Plombon on the book. I'm really looking forward to this. I have not picked up my copy yet, but I'm about to. Tell me, how's Ben over there?
You mean since the book has been released?
Yeah.
It's been a lot of, I guess, promotion, trying to get it out there. A lot of emails. I've done a couple of these podcasts too. So it's been a lot of that, just trying to get it out there into the sort of like get into the sort of the attention of the people who, the wrestling community and everything who'd be interested in. So far, I guess it's done for a wrestling book. I guess it's done, not bad. So I'm pretty proud of it so far.
That's great. I've seen some positive far on on social media. Mm-hmm. People are saying that they like it a lot. Excuse me. Great. Now, I know that you've we discussed the history of the book. Decided to for anybody that wants to check out our previous interview, I'm going to put a link down in the bottom. You check it out. It's actually probably the most played episode of my podcast. So I have to say thank you to Jim for that one. That's really
well, I'm glad I didn't turn off any potential viewers. So that's a win in my book. Actually, I got to
admit, when the episode of Dark Side of the Ring hit, I really went hard on putting the episode even out there even further, promoting it every day around that time period. I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, I thank you for that, for all the work that put into that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was a really fun interview to do. So I guess let's talk a little bit, because I have not read the book. You did tell some stories last time that about his life prior to professional wrestling. I guess he was in the clothing business, correct?
Mostly in the clothing business. He was a buyer and for a lot of stores. Well, not a lot, but for a few clothing stores. There's also he owned some stores. I sure at least two. One of them he said that he first owned when he was 16. I don't know if that's like an honest, I don't know if that's true or not, but that was something that he told other people. And he worked for Lane Bryant for a while, and then he also worked for, he didn't work for, but he sold gold during the 70s, and he had a lot of gold, and apparently, the price for gold during that time just skyrocketed, so he was able to make a good profit off of that.
Right. That's incredible. So he ended up getting into, I guess, professional wrestling in the later 80s. Well, I mean, he, if I remember correctly, it was 1990 is when he decided that he was the UWF, correct?
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Was he involved to that? So,
only with his clothing stores, he would a lot of times he would bring in wrestlers for a signing, for a promotional thing to get people into the stores. He did that a lot. I think not only to bring in to attract customers, but to also just because he liked around the wrestling. So he didn't have any experience like firsthand in wrestling before he started the UWF, but he was around wrestling. There was in California, there was the whole thing where Jack Armstrong always knew who he was even before he was introduced to him, because he would buy like the entire like first row and all his friends and everything. So he's always the one who's in the front row, with a ton of people, a lot of entourage and stuff like that. Right.
I remember Jack Armstrong prior to the UWF wrestling for California Championship Wrestling. I think he feuded with Junior around that time period. So you did a lot of work in so many people for this. You've interviewed people like Rick Allen, who was on the beach, correct? And Steve Ray and Brian Blair. A lot of real lot of work into this for a number of years.
Yes. It was one of those things where I always said, like, I would talk to basically anyone I could find. Even if, like, it never came down to this, but, like, if I could find someone who even worked, like, the concessions, I would have gone out of my way to talk to them. You never know. You never know when someone's going to have a story to, add to the book. And then there are times when you talk to people and you find out that they really don't have a lot about, although you would think they would. I think the two surprise ones were Joe Ponce, is how you pronounce it. He worked security for the UWF. He had New York shows. He had a lot of really good insight into what went on during that time and the times that he was around Herb Abrams. And the other one was Madman Pondo, who only had one wrestling match. This was in Florida Memorial just after the Beach Brawl. And he had a horrible match with a man named Super Ninja. I can't remember what his real name was right now. But anyway, he had this incredible story of like why it was such a train wreck. And his interaction with Herb Abrams and even, Lou Albano and Bruno Sammartino, Craig DeGeorge. So that was one person where you think, okay, he just kind of rolled in, had one match, and left. But you find out that there's this whole story about that one show. So that's what I'm saying. It's like you always gotta be open to talking to anyone, because you know who's gonna have what. So if I have any advice, if there's any sort of writing out there who are looking to be looking to write a biography, the one piece of advice is talk to everyone. So anyway, that was sort of a little bit, but so yeah,
that's great. That's good info. Great info. So his Florida tapings, were they around the where did he film some of the TV tapings? Was that the studios or?
Yep. One of them was in the Universal Studios. That was prior to the Beach Brawl. That was a couple shows before. So
they're like outside in like a grassed area or something.
Yeah.
I remember those.
Nickelodeon Studios, which always points out, because I'm sure anyone my age during that time, either went there or really wanted to go there. So that's always something that sticks out for fans of the YouTube.
Yeah, I remember those. That for some reason that the setup was a little bit weird, but I always really liked that particular set of TV tapings out there. And then there was like another era of TV tapings where I'm trying to remember, it was like a darkened arena actually, and I think they were like sort of later tapings. I don't know really anything about them other than the Black Hearts wrestling some preliminary guys. It ended up being, for some reason, that period for those particular couple of those were really, really good for her.
I believe the ones that Madman Pondo show was at the War Memorial. I think that's what you're talking about.
That probably sounds like it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Did you ended up talking to Brian Blair with the book?
Yeah, it was Brian Blair's kind of a funny story because when I first started writing the book, researching it in 2010, he was one of the first people I contacted because he had a website, because he was into politics. I don't know if he's still doing that, but at the time, email that I could just contact him with. He said that he was really busy at the time and that he would sort of wait, and I think he just wanted to see if I was really, about this. So I think it was like 8 or 9 years later, like I emailed him again, and I just thought, well, I have nothing to lose. And that was the time when he, finally agreed to talk to me. So that was one of those where it's like, you put in effort, and sometimes it pays off.
That must have been an interesting conversation. He seems like a genuinely good guy, Brian.
Oh yeah, he's a really nice guy. Yeah.
What about what was the conversation like? I'm not going to ask you details about the book because I want people to buy it. So I'm not going to try to do too many full length stories. But what was it like talking to Sunny Beach and Steve Ray?
Sunny Beach was the first interview I did, and I always have to give him credit because I had before him. I had some. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, something happened on my screen. Anyway, yeah, Sunny Beach was the first one that I spoke to. And he was, like I said before, like it was nice of him to be able to talk to me for that. I think it was like a couple hours. He was like on the road driving because he works, he owns some sort of security business. So he was driving to some place I needed to be at the job. He talked to me for about 2 hours. So he was the first one.
Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
Yeah, how was Steve Ray to talk to?
Steve Ray was very open about a lot of things. He's one of those people that I couldn't find, and then just all of a sudden one day he up on Facebook with some profiles or whatever, and he was very sort of open to the interview. We actually talked twice. First time it was about an hour and a half, I think, and then we had additional questions, so we got together and we talked again on the phone. He's a very nice guy too. He was able. Again, I've been using this word, but he had a lot of insight as to his both the positives he had in Herb Abrams' life and the negatives he had in Herb Abrams' life. So I mean, it was a lot of he saw that he was always been a friend to him and was someone who he could kind of, but at the same time. And Abrams was in these situations that you shouldn't have been in terms of like the drinking or maybe party too long. Steve Ray opened up about maybe being an enabler at those times about those situations. So that's really all you can really ask for people, and is that someone's very honest and very able to look back at themselves and be able to be your sort of their own critic.
Right. I Dark Side of the Ring episode brought a lot out about Herb Abrams. There was some things that I thought that were a bit weird about it. Did you happen to see it?
Yes, I did see it.
Yeah. What was your overall take on that?
I think it was a decent overview. I think for a lot of stuff that I didn't well, not a lot of stuff, but there was stuff on there that I didn't know either. The Lenny Duke story about how Abrams went to McMahon and asked him that if he could promote her on the West Coast or something. That was something I never heard.
Right.
But I think overall it was, for 40 minutes, I think, somewhere around there, the running time. I think they did fine. Although, like, I sort of wish that they would have maybe talked to more of the family. But I mean, in terms of just putting together an hour long, show, I think they did fine.
Did you talk to John Arezzi? Because he knew him a little bit from his radio show. Herb would show up there a lot in the earlier days of the UWF. I listened to his podcast before he changed it over, and he had really interesting stories. And a lot of the thing about him now is that he tells stories about what he thinks now and how how like he thought like Abrams was getting out of control and we're just getting crazy. He kept getting weirder as time went on, and he owed John money and all this other stuff. Like, did you ever hear any of those stories, like through Arezzi or through his podcast or anything like that?
I don't think I've ever listened to his podcast. Got in contact with him and originally he was pretty open to having a conversation, but he later said he didn't want to he didn't want to contribute to it because he had a book coming out and he wanted to say all the stories, I guess, for the book. Right.
Yeah, his book came out recently. It seems like I've heard a lot of really good things about his book that's come out. He's not only talking about his wrestling career, but talking about his music and such as well. Yep. So, did you ever talk to that Dark Side of the Ring episode? They had the television production gentleman that was they knew Abrams really well. That was really good
I think you're talking about Duke.
Is that him? Yeah.
No, I never got to talk to him, although I tried, multiple times. Originally, he was one of the people that I originally wrote to see if he would be interested in. He wouldn't. It's at first he wanted to do it, and it seemed like every time we emailed, he was less and less enthusiastic about it. And I think, and eventually he asked, like, what my questions were going to be. So I sent him a bunch of my questions. And then after that, he declined to be interviewed because he said that he didn't know how that information was going to be used in the book. So I sort of respected his wishes and didn't pursue it more. Although, like, I would have absolutely loved to talk to him. I feel I would have been able to fill in a lot of the gaps I wasn't able to figure out when I was writing the book. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Right. It seemed like in that Dark Side of the Ring that he was the one person that had positive things to say about Abrams, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was really, really close to him. He was the one, when working with Sports Channel, that could always be counted on to get the show in on time. Abrams was very sort of like, very sort of, I guess, impulsive or just very sort of, I don't know, he wouldn't, he would be sort of all over the place, while Lenny Duke would be the one to make sure that the show was on, that the tape was sent in this so it could be played, make sure that was, had the right running time and everything. So without him, if you had someone else, I think the show and like a really big Lenny Duke wasn't there for all the shows. He wasn't there for the Minot, North Dakota show, and that was the one show that they never released, except for that DVD that Zeus Rift, who's sort of in the place of Lenny Duke at that time. That was the one that he booked, and it never aired, and it was a complete mess. So there was definitely a drop in sort of the production quality there when he left WF.
Well, I ended up having Barry Horowitz on the podcast probably like in December, and I asked him about the UWF, and he didn't really have much about the UWF. Only made 1 or 2 appearances, right? Something to that effect.
He was in the South Carolina shows. He answered a few questions through his Facebook page, but he didn't go into great detail with anything. He might not have had that much interaction. I think he was like one of these guys who, it's just a show for him. But he did make a comment in his answers where it was where he said that Abrams was actually really good talk, like he could cut a promo. And I think that's something that's kind of like forgotten, is that if he could have kind of controlled himself during some of those and some of those promos, he really would have been seen as a much better talker than perceived as, when it was like he was just sort of all over the place and stuff like that.
One of the things that I thought was hilarious, the Dark Side of the Ring, they brought up for what was the show in Las Vegas that they had at the MGM Grand? Blackjack Brawl, right? Mm-hmm. How Abrams had the custom-made boots made for him with the UWF logo in the boots.
And then he had the yellow suit and the Steve Ross, who was doing the announcing, I think, said something. He was like a living picture or something like that. So, yeah.
So what else you got about this book? What else you want to throw out there?
Wow. I mean, I don't know. Are you talking about like story? Or,
Sure. If you want to share anything. I mean, I don't want to get too detailed because I want people to buy this book, because this is a book I really believe in as well, because I was a huge fan of the Abrams UWF at that time period.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I guess the thing to sort of keep in mind with the book is that there are a lot of stories, well, not a lot, but there are some stories in there about sort of the sensationalistic parts of his life, drugs and the prostitutes. But I also think that you have to kind of pass that. It's difficult when you ask me, what the legacy of the UWF and Herb Abrams would be. And I said, even though there's more to it than, prostitutes and cocaine, that's sort of what he's always going to go down known for. He's, and then the whole story about the end of his life, baby oil, and again, the prostitutes and his police car and the heart attack. I don't know, like someone said that like he would probably be very happy to know that people remember him and even remember him for those sort of oddball antics. But you also got to kind of understand too that there was a very sort of insecure man hidden behind all that. There was sort of a stage persona, if using that term correctly. It always had to be sort of the outrageous, bombastic wrestling leader, but a lot of times it was used as sort of a shield from times, from being hurt, feeling insecure about himself. And that's what you really have to sort of get into, and I think that's what really ends up being the most interesting part of his life, was that he was a really sort of different person when he was away from a lot of the sort of the wrestling. And when he was around the wrestlers, that he could actually be himself around. But sadly, that's probably going to be the legacy. Is that, and I don't know if I'm even going to say sadly, because maybe I know his family wants him to be known more than just that. Honestly, I think that's a good point that, we have no idea. He might be, if he was able to talk, from beyond the grave now, I'm thinking maybe he would be actually happy that he attained that sort of infamy now. So, it's complicated. But, when you dig deeper into it, there's an entirely different story beyond than just what has gotten most people attention to.
One of the things is I got a couple more questions, and then we can wrap this up. And then one of the things was that what do you think about him? He announced that he had signed Bruiser Brody to a contract when Bruiser Brody had been dead for 2 years now. Yeah. I've heard this mentioned many times in Arezi's podcast and stuff like that. Accounts that it's supposed to be like this guy. Did he not know about Bruiser Brody, or was it just like he was out, like kind of out there and just?
Man, that was the same convention. He announced that he signed Adrian Adonis too. Mm-hmm. Adonis had died in I think it was like a car crash or something.
Yep.
Maybe the year before. And Brody, he said he signed to be his booker. I have no idea. I that was one of those things where like I never find someone that actually knew. He just didn't know that those people had passed away. And you gotta remember too, that was 1990, 1989. Information wasn't, you didn't, if you didn't read like the dirt sheets or something, I don't know if you would know, or if Bruiser Brody wasn't on television at that time. Right. I don't know how you would know if he hadn't passed away, or if he had passed away. I would think that's probably just him not knowing the information, and then just because he threw a lot of things that he said he signed and that were going to work for him never ended up happening. So,
well, Blackjack Mulligan supposedly, and he was in prison during that time period, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That was another one. Yeah.
Right. And then the other one is like during this, I'm going to keep referring to, because I learned a lot about Abrams through Arezi's podcast, stuff that I didn't necessarily know. Mm-hmm. He also mentioned that he had signed, was it the Honky Tonk Man or Greg Valentine, and then that when they showed up on WWF TV again, he said he had claimed that he had leased them out to back out to the WWF. So I mean, I don't get any stories like that.
That's entirely possible that he said, just to kind of save face. I've never heard that, but but I can look back at that and say that he could have. It's very possible.
Yeah, it was really bizarre and kind of comical in a way,
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, Jonathan. So, why don't you tell people they can find this book?
You can find it on Amazon now. So just type in Herb Abrams book or Tortured Ambition, get you right to it. So if you want to purchase it, you can get it there. No digital, it's just in sort of like a physical copy.
Thank you so much. Is there and there is a Facebook page, Tortured Ambition, the Herb Abrams story Facebook page, which everybody should go check out because there's so much information that you can read on there for free. So
a lot of rare photos in it too. So you can, and that of course is free to peruse. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All
right. I want to thank you very, very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.